let's start reading. I've heard time and time again from people in my life and people on this channel that they would really love to read more. There's so many benefits in reading, and the research indicates that it can improve our knowledge, vocabulary, our empathy, reduce stress, improve sleep, and even slow down cognitive illnesses. I loved reading as a child and have really re-embraced it over the last couple of years, and it's now an essential self-care habit in my slow life. Now we're into autumn, it's the perfect cozy season to snuggle up with a book, so I thought I would share some tips on how you can become a fellow bookworm. This video is going to be split into 5 different sections, including how you can get motivated to read, how you can find time, how you can find books, why you should read a variety, and also, of course, how to make this fun. So let's get started. And side note, I will be referring to my bookworm planner on my Etsy store throughout this video, so I'll link that down below in case you guys are interested. So the first tip is about how to get motivated to read. I think it's really important to figure out why you want to read and have really proper personal reasons for this rather than just something that you feel like you should be doing. For me, reading helps me slow down, reduce stress, give me great fodder as a writer, and it also gives me that all-important escapism. Setting yourself goals can be great. I set myself the goal of reading 1 book a year, so 52 books in total, and I'm almost already at that goal this year, which I'm really pleased about. I think it's really important to be realistic when you set your goals. I'd always recommend starting quite modest and then working up so you don't set yourself up for a fail. It can be fun to track your progress, which is why I included a reading tracker and a reading challenge section in my bookworm planner, and it can be great to see you moving forwards towards your goal, and also gives you opportunities to reward yourself when you hit certain milestones. I think one of the main difficulties a lot of us face, or at least feel like we're facing, is we don't have time to read. That's why I like to schedule in my reading using, again, my Notion planners that I sell on my Etsy store. I read throughout the day, so I'll read first thing in the morning with my cup of tea. I'll often take reading breaks through the day just to break up my work, and I will also always read in bed before I go to sleep. So I recommend looking at a schedule and finding time where you could maybe fit in a little bit of reading, even if it's only 5 to 10 minutes. It'd also be good to look at how you're already spending your time and maybe swapping out some habits. For instance, if you think you don't have time to read and then you maybe look at your social media analytics and screen time, you might see that you can maybe swap out some of that for reading instead. So look for these pockets of time. I'm always reading. I always have a book with me whenever I go anywhere, particularly if I think there might be a wait, say I'm going to the hairdressers or the doctors, or I'm going to be travelling on a bus, a train. I pretty much always have a book with me. Once you make reading a habit, it's so much easier to keep going with this, find more time, keep motivated, and of course work towards your reading goals. Another challenge people can find is they don't know what books to read and where to find this information. This is the worst of picking up a book and then realising it's actually not for you, and it can put you off reading entirely. So if you want to find book recommendations online, you've got loads of different options. You can look at bestseller lists, you can look at Goodreads, you can look at sites where you've bought previous books and look at what they're recommending as similar. I love getting recommendations from blogs like Substack, so there's lots of different publications on Substack that focus entirely on books, so you can get loads of different ideas and recommendations there. And also YouTube is another fantastic source. There's really wonderful book creators on here that will give you recommendations but also make you inspired to read. In terms of in real life, of course, you can visit bookstores and libraries. I think browsing the kind of places gives you great ideas of what you could be reading, and it's also fantastic to ask the booksellers about what they would recommend if you're looking for a certain type of genre. Reading doesn't have to be expensive. I get the majority of my books from either the library, so completely free, or secondhand. I can get these secondhand mostly in charity shops. It's one of my favourite ways of finding them, but you can also get books secondhand online. I got a tip recently to look at Oxfam as a great place to get secondhand books that's cheaper than like maybe eBay, so that's maybe something you could check out. I find it really useful to have somewhere where I can write down my full reading list. This means I can dip into it and get inspiration whenever I want. I have a reading list that I also include as part of my bookworm planner on Etsy, and it gives you the opportunity to split up the different books so it's not just one long list. If you're anything like me, your TBR can be quite long, so I really love that I can sort this in different ways. I can sort it by genre, priority, or season. It just makes it a little more manageable, and it means you've always got somewhere you can add new ideas whenever you want. I think one of the best tips when it comes to reading more books is to break all the rules. One of the ones I love to break is the rule that you have to read 1 book at once. Personally, I love to have a variety of books on the go pretty much at the same time. This means that depending on my mood, I can dip into different genres. For instance, sometimes I really want to escape into the world of a classic literature, whether that be Austen, Bronte, Dickens. But sometimes I maybe don't want something that serious or that much of a challenge, and I'd rather dip into something that's easier to digest. Also remember, children's books are not just for children. I think they are wonderful books to escape into, especially the classics. I store books throughout my home and I like to keep them in baskets because it's a really fun aesthetic way to do it. I have some books that I'm reading currently or going to be reading soon in the basket beside my bed, and then I have others stored elsewhere for when I want to pick them up. As well as a variety of genres, you want to look at the different ways you can read. So I prefer to read physical books most of the time. I just love the feel of it, but obviously there's so many different options these days that are a bit more convenient. You can try reading ebooks, or you can also listen to books, and that's a great thing to do if you're a little bit busy and are struggling to fit in time to read. I think one of the most important things to remember when it comes to reading is that it should be fun. I love to romanticise my reading. This can involve reading in different locations. I personally love to take a book outside, and it's something I try and do all year round. It's so much fun to find the perfect reading spot, and my favourite is usually beside a river, loch, or under the perfect reading tree. I also like to treat myself and go out the house to read in a cafe occasionally. I love the cosy atmosphere of a cafe, particularly in this time of year. And then I think it can be really motivating to have spots on your home where you like to read. Setting up the perfect reading nook can be such a fun activity. To create the kind of ambience, you want to look for somewhere that it can be quiet and you can really get involved in the story. You can set it up with things like blankets and candles. I also love to treat myself to bookmarks quite often, and I have a good variety now, and I like to match the bookmark with the book I'm reading. Of course not necessary, but it just makes it so much more fun. If you've watched this channel before, you know that I love to read seasonally. This means that I match the book I'm reading with the kind of atmosphere of the season I'm in at the time. I find that it both makes me notice what's going on in the world around me, but also gets me more involved and absorbed in a story. During the autumn-winter months, I love to read things that are a little bit more serious or gloomy, gothic tales. Murder mystery is the perfect thing to read in that time of year. Whereas in the spring-summer, I like to read slightly lighter reads. It's definitely the time of year that I read the most romance. I actually have a seasonal reading guide post on my Substack, so I'll link that below if you want to learn a bit more about that. Something else that I think can increase your enjoyment of reading is to have time to reflect on what you've read. To do this more efficiently, I've created it as part of my Bookworm Notion planner, and you have places where you can store quotes from your favourite books. If you're reading non-fiction, this can be a great way to store key information that you can quickly check in on, but I also love to store quotes from fiction. Again, as a writer, this is a great source of inspiration, and I also think fiction has just as much to learn as non-fiction. Don't underestimate it. It just means that you can feel more connected with what you read, and it can also inform what you want to read more of. I also like to rate my books, and again, this can show me the kind of books that I'm really resonating with. It's also just a really fun bookish activity to do on the weekend. So I hope that's given you a little bit more ideas, inspiration, how you can read more. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas, so please do add those in the comments below. And remember, I've linked that bookworm planner in my description so you can check that out. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, I love chatting books with you, and I will see you all next week.